you also, it's worth noting, from soul music to this soul work, you've made, as you point out, soul to soul connections
Yeah.
with many of our artists, like
Yes.
Maurice White, like Nina
Yeah. Oh,
Simone.
Nina,
Can you talk a
absolutely.
little bit? And Roberta Flack as and Aretha even on some
Oh,
level.
so, yeah, yeah,
So that
absolutely.
spirit work is there. Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to mention two other people that I think are important in that list, which is Shaka Khan, who I've had the first really connection, not as an interviewee, yes, but I recall, I don't remember which conversation it was, but somewhere it was around around the song Egyptian Song, which
Hmm.
she is on one of the Rufus albums, and it taught the lyrics are about a dream she had about having lived in Egypt, in a different incarnation. So that was that began a whole dialogue between us that has gone on for many, many years. And there's many in chapter 7 of the book, I do reference the connections with some of the people just mentioned, Nina, Maurice, Shaka. I don't know if Roberta's mentioned as a connection, but so much as these are people I've had these conversations with. And um, I was going to say, just remembering somebody else who does, I think I mentioned her in the book, but of course, Tina Marie. I mean, anyone who would do a song called Deja Vu, I've been here before, and she
Yes.
and I did have conversations. Absolutely. Even on the last time I saw her, when she was here in Britain for our last show, alas, she didn't, wasn't, she was going to come back the next year, but she passed on. However, I
Yes.
remember sitting with her and talking about that no Egyptian song, about deja vu, and about just her whole reference of having been here before. So it's not an unusual concept for some people.
Be open, folks. I'm a Southern Black Christian man, and I'm very much open to not only these stories and this new understanding, but it unpacks so many lessons that translate no
Yes,
matter what you're going through in your
yes.
life. But I want to make sure we take some time to talk about your new book, Through Seven Lives. Put it up there, David. Let us see it.
Oh, yes,
Let
yes,
us see it. Through Seven Lives, it explores the concept of reincarnation, chronicling six of your recalled past lives across different eras and cultures. I centered this book as a big gift for my partner, Ant, of 20 years.
mm,
You've met him,
yes, I
and
have.
you folks have had spiritual conversations. So
Yes,
the
we
idea
did.
that you have put many of these experiences into a book means that we all want to pick it up, but I want you to tell us
Mm,
about Through Seven Lives.
mm. Well, without going to every element of my life going way back, I would say that the catalyst for this particular book, or the conversation that became the catalyst for the book, really was a conversation I had with Maurice White, the founder of Earth, Wind, and Fire. And the occasion was that I was in Los Angeles. I was living in New York, so I was in Los Angeles to do a interview with Maurice for the cover of Blues and Soul magazine because Earth, Wind, and Fire were about to go to Europe for the first time. And this was like July of 1975. And we had it was very difficult getting Maurice or any members of the Earth, Wind and Fire together to do the interview because they were rehearsing, blah, blah, blah. So the very last opportunity was that courtesy of CBS Records, I got on a flight from Los Angeles to Seattle so that I could do the interview with Maurice. And literally, I was anywhere to catch up with him in a confined space, so to speak. So, of course, we started speaking about some of the song titles, Devotion, Keep Your Head to the Sky. And I talked to him about how I thought I loved the idea of music being a way to convey certain messages. And so then, we were talking about his interest in different religions and spent time in Japan and so forth. So we got into it, and I said, well, one of the things that seems to happen in one of the songs, I can't remember which one it was you referenced reincarnation. And he said, yes. He said, yes. He said, are you interested in that? I said, yes, I am actually. Now, I had some interest in it, but I can't say that I had ever studied about it or anything. But I was like, he said, well, I have some books to recommend you. When you get back to New York, you can find these two books in an esoteric bookshop, because back then, it's 1975, we did not have books that were about spirituality or transformation or different, an alternative approach to healing. None of those things were in mainstream shops. I mean, there were books, but you have to find an esoteric bookshop, as he called it. So he had written the names of the books on an envelope, on the back of my envelope. I got the books, and one of them was called Seth Speaks, and it was channeled information from a non-physical entity called Seth, and it was a very dense book for me to read at the age of 27. The other book was called The Ultimate Frontier. The Ultimate Frontier was about a brotherhood. It was with brotherhood, but it meant brother and sisterhood. A community that had been started, but and it's a bit complex to explain. But the bottom line was, it was about how what the world could be. This is a model for how the world could work, as I recall it. And on the cover of the book, there were uh, three portraits, you could say. One was of the author, the other one was King David, I think, King David from the Bible. And the third one, it was either King David or Moses. I've got to go back and look. But the one that I was like, who is that? Was a pharaoh. Uh, Now I'm going to give you the usual pronunciation of his name, which is not really the correct pronunciation, but he was no has been known as Akhenaten. The Egyptian, the original Egyptian name is Akhenaton, but for the purposes of this, we will refer to him Akhenaten. So I read about
And
Akhenaten.
and and just to
Yeah.
insert, Akhenaten is my partner Anthony's artist name, which
Yes.
is a little bit
Yeah.
where that the
Yeah,
story.
absolutely.
Mhm.
100%. And I became fascinated with this character. Fascinated. Who is this? And the more I read about it, and more I found out about him, and how he was so much a vehicle for transformation, in a sense, in a dynasty, an Egyptian pharaonic dynasty, where, it was all about the worshiping the different animal gods. And he was uh, he was a he was I would put it, a disruptor. He wanted to disrupt the order of things, and it came from him having um, studied at a mystery school. And we're talking about 3,000 years ago, just so we put it in some context. And when he ascended the throne, he said, "Oh, yeah, I want to do away with all of this worshiping of animal gods." He said that the sun, Aten, without the sun, there will be no life on the planet, which was actually true. And then he constructed a whole different way of being about life, poetry. He wrote poems. I mean, he just really changed. He attempted to change the trajectory of the history of ancient Egypt. Unfortunately, it didn't end well at that point. However, that was my like I was like, who it? I mean, I was in my 20s, late 20s, early 30s in New York, and I was fascinated, Patrick. I was fascinated. So now I wrote a poem in 1978 when I lived in New York. It was just a poem, and I'd written a few poems. They just came to me. And this
Yeah.
particular poem was called My History is All on My Face. I still have the actual original poem as typewritten. It was originally written, and then I typed it, and it referenced um it was about reincarnation. It was about my history is all on my face. I who have sat on the throne on a throne in Egypt. I who have been a voodoo priest. Now, where did that come from? It came from wherever it came from. I did not sit down and design the poem. It just showed up
It,
on
it
the
came
page.
through you.
Yes, yes. And I didn't think, it was a poem, and there was with many other poems. And to cut through lots and lots of a story about it, about my interest in reincarnation. Many years later, when I lived in Los Angeles, I worked with a past life hypnotherapist named Stephanie Jordan. And Stephanie is actually the person who wrote, I think it was the introduction or the forward in the book. And those sessions were quite engaging. And very engaging. I mean, I learned so much from and her premise, which is also mine, is that based on the idea of having lived before, as a soul, we bring in lessons for us to learn in our evolution as a soul, and each life provides those lessons. And looking from another perspective, each life contains challenges. So I definitely am adherent to the idea of karma, as
Mhm.
in one could say in a different way of putting it, um, we reap what we sow. See, that's a very that I only remember first hearing that phrase even in America. I remember I think it was in a black church, or I don't a gospel. I used to go to a gospel church. I don't know
Yes,
where I heard it, but it's definitely reap what you sow is definitely a fundamental principle
yes,
in one could say different religions or
absolutely.
different principles of how to live life.
Correct.
So all of that it informs, I think, how if one thinks about how you be in life, if you're going to treat people well, not so much racking up points in heaven, but so much as living a life of service, of goodness. Now, I'm human, and I can't say that that's the way I've always lived my life, and I don't know anyone who has. However, the point being that in this process of discovering with Stephanie about my different elements of my, one could say, previous lives, it kind of became, I don't know how, it's really hard to explain how the book showed up, but it did. I started working on um on originally the premise, it wasn't called Through Seven Lives. Was it? Maybe it became called Through Seven Lives at some point, but
Yeah,
I just focused on six of the incarnations, one could say, that had been part of that poem. And
I love that.
um and it never occurred to me until I started to have the material come through me, so to speak, that these were that the poem was almost like a predictive a prediction in a way of what I would write about. And so that's it. And here's what I would say for those who may not have any reference for reincarnation, it's very much reincarnation of past lives is very much more of an Eastern philosophy. And then,
Correct.
yeah, so, but for those for whom they would say, well, no, I'm not so sure about it. Here's what I would say. If you get the book and just read it as stories, because the stories are vivid. And I will share this with you, Patrick, and anyone else who's watching this. I didn't plan the stories. The only one of those incarnations that's a real person or ever existed in history is the first one, who was an Egyptian pharaoh, part of the family of Akhenaten and Nefertiti and Tutankhamun as he became known. And he is Smenkhare, who was the younger brother of Akhenaten. And it's kind of different. Just say that that's the first incarnation that I had show up, right?
Yeah.
And so that was that. So the book that's how the book came about, and I did not originally think of how what it was going to look like or any form for it, and it went through different iterations. And again, I invite people who have any concerns about whether there is such a thing, just to read the stories as stories. That's fine.
It's an exploration. It's an opportunity to sort of learn lessons through a different narrative.